Welcome back to the Business of Biotech. I'm your host, Ben Comer, Chief Editor at Life Science Leader, and I'm pleased to speak today with Brian Lortie, President and CEO of Uniquity Bio, a startup focused on immunology and inflammation that emerged from stealth in May of 2024. I'm excited to talk to Brian for a few reasons. One is his experience building teams and driving growth at companies large and small, including 14 years in various roles at GSK, 7 years at Endo Pharmaceuticals, where he rose to president of branded pharmaceuticals, in addition to company formation work and team building at Onspira Therapeutics, which was acquired in 2019. Now, Brian is back to lead and build Uniquity, a clinical stage company backed by Blackstone Life Sciences, which is currently developing solritatug, a monoclonal antibody in licensed from Merck. Thank you for being here, Brian.
Great to be here with you, Ben. Thank you.
I'm glad to have you. I wanted to start with this idea of building and managing teams, large and small. And I'm curious, what you've perhaps learned from your experience about what makes people and thus businesses successful.
It's a great question, and it's one I reflect on because, as you pointed out, and even listening to you there, it's like, oh yeah, I remember those things because we tend to get focused on the target right in front of us, but we're all a product of our experiences, right? Good and bad. And I can say that I've got scars from mistakes made along the way, but we learn from all of those. I think for me, the common theme, whether it's a huge team or a small team, is the quality of the people on that team. Here, we have been very thoughtful to build out a team that, I always refer to as our varsity team on the field because, you know, your podcast is titled The Business of Biotech. And as you and your listeners know, it is not a business for the weak of heart. But one way you can try and sway the odds in your favor, I guess, is by putting the very best team around you. And that's what we've done here. And just to, speak a little bit more about the current day, in this company, which is clinical stage, very well capitalized by our very good partners at Blackstone. We're in 3 clinical trials right now with readouts later this year and early next year. Those are all hard jobs. We've staffed a team that just about universally began their careers in large or at least large mid-sized pharma companies, right? But everyone has the wiring or the internal DNA to find what we do in a more entrepreneurial, nimble company environment very attractive. And it's that combination of those two things that I think is so important for us for two reasons. One is coming, having grown up myself and many of my colleagues, grown up in a large pharma environment, we get used to the levels of rigor and the scientific practice that's so important to get things right. We don't like to cut corners. We've seen the landscape littered with the wreckage of companies that try and do things too fast or on the fly or on the cheap or outsmart the regulatory realities, and it just doesn't work. We like to put together a program that ultimately a large pharma acquirer, for example, will find to be impressive and attractive. And we know what that looks like because we've all sat on that side of the table. I mean, I've bought companies sitting in a big pharma environment, and I've sold companies sitting in a small company environment, and I understand what works in that, and that is universal. So, I guess long answer to your question, which is whether it's a large team or a small team, and almost regardless of what they're doing, it's the quality of the people and the alignment to the mission at hand that really, I think, separates the successful companies from the ones that aren't as successful.
I think it's interesting that you mentioned, your staff at Uniquity having experience at mid and larger companies. Are there different team dynamics in a large team versus a small team, or if not dynamics, different things that can be learned, maybe easier, or that you just will have experience in with a large team that maybe you wouldn't in a small team?
Yeah, there certainly are. And first of all, we never stop learning, right? So I learned things today that I didn't know yesterday, and hopefully that process will continue. what people often find when they join a small team from a like a large pharma team is that there are very few places to hide. And I mean that literally, or the result, your sort of your work product. Everything is out in the light, because we don't have layers and layers of management and bureaucracy, and that's by design, right? But it also means that everybody's work and everybody's efforts and the way we work together is right out there for everyone to see and experience. So, people have to be comfortable with that. The other dynamic is kind of an obvious one, but even though I consider us, very nicely staffed, I mean, we've got about 30 full-time people now on the team at our just about our third year anniversary. And that's probably about right for us with one program to manage. Um, but that means everybody on the team from the leadership on down has to be comfortable wearing a number of different hats, has to have the ability to sort of look around corners and see where things need to be done. And if there's nobody doing it, we do it, right? And that starts with me and goes throughout all of the company. Um, that's something not everybody's comfortable with. They might say that they are, but it's actually learning that is often an experience for them. But it's good. And I will say that, I'm very, very happy and very pleased that we've got a team of people that roll up their sleeves every morning and figure out a way to get the job done.
You are president and CEO at Uniquity, and I'm curious about what you see as the kind of key talents that you bring to the organization, and I'm also curious about what you enjoy doing the most professionally.
Yeah, so maybe I'll take that in reverse order. What I enjoy, what keeps me coming to work every morning is, again, it sounds a little bit corny, but it's the people I work with. My people will tell you that I have a no jerk policy, and we really try and adhere to that. What does that mean? It means that in many cases, we're spending as much time with the people we work with as with our families. In some cases, I hate to say, it could be even more, right? Some periods of time just get so crazy. So you better be working with people that share your value set, that share, a viewpoint on the world, and then certainly the interpersonal skills are so important. This is a place where, we don't tolerate disrespect, and we insist on quality of work, and we insist that everybody work hard, but work together, and we try and make sure we're enjoying that and having fun too. And there's a lot of different things we do there. So that's kind of the second question. What do I bring? Um, I am not the scientist, right? My background is company building, team building, commercial. I ran big commercial businesses at GSK and at Endo. I did run a global biologics development organization for a few years at GSK. That was part of my career development. It was super valuable, and I draw on that experience every day here, where the team and I are so focused on clinical development and not on commercialization. Um, my job in, I see my job is providing resources and opportunities for the team, making sure we've got the right team on the field, and then, to some extent, getting out of their way and let them do good work. Um, but that doesn't mean I can't be involved or shouldn't be involved at the minute detail. So what I learn along the way from the team is the ability to ask the right questions. I may not have the answers. In fact, most cases, I will not have the right answers, but I hope I bring to the team an ability to catalyze arriving at those answers, and then I'll lead the team in executing on those plans, but also lead us to be aware when those plans might need adjustment. Right, mid-course adjustments are part of the game here. So it's that kind of managing and governing the company. As I said, resources, working closely with the board, working closely with our investment partners and strategics. That's a big part of what I do, but I hope to leave my fingerprints on all aspects of the business too, by at very least bringing on and leading the right people.
Are there things that you learned working in commercial functions and I know this is not your first rodeo working on, clinical development in a smaller company, but I'm just curious about that experience at GSK, at Endo, and more commercially focused functions. Are there things that you learned from that can translate into leading a company that is, very much focused exclusively, I would say, at this point on R&D?
Yeah, this is a development operation, full stop. But the answer is yes. And I'll step back and say, at the end of all of these activities, all these processes, whether it's early discovery, whether it's preclinical, clinical development, all the way to commercialization, we're trying to satisfy something that ends up with a patient, right? At the end of all of this work is a patient, and everybody involved in that value chain, large company, small company, commercial, pre-commercial development, we're trying to improve somebody's life at the end of it. It really is what draws us all, I think, to the life sciences part of this business. So I try and bring that focus and make sure that's at the center of everything we do and that we don't lose sight of that because you can get target fixation in any one of these jobs and forget that at the end of this clinical trial or at the end of this manufacturing process that ultimately we're trying to bring important differentiated medicines that will improve the lives of patients. This past year, I will say that we did an exercise which was fun and I think very rewarding to the team in that we brought in patients and physicians to come talk to us as part of our team week. We do a team week every year where we bring all the company together for a week and we strategize together, but we also have some fun together and we make sure we're all on the same track and aligned behind objectives and mission. And in this case, we really centered that on the patients that we serve. And listening to a patient, in this case, who suffers from, COPD and lung disease, and the physician that treats them was really very valuable for us. So, at the end of the day, whether it's commercial or development, we are here to solve that problem, and it's good to just continue to keep that in mind.
I mentioned that Onspira was acquired in 2019. Uniquity emerged from stealth last year, but I think you were a part of the original company formation a couple of years before that. And I'm curious, what you would say about your approach to just helping get the company off the ground, thinking through the business model, how you sort of, I guess, eventually made the case to Blackstone.
It is a very interesting story. It's one that we're proud of, and part of the reason is because it all worked out well. Yeah, we sold on Spira at the very, very end of 2019. Literally the closing dinner, I think, was just as COVID-19 was popping up on everybody's news feed, and we were very nervous coming out of that because we had been in a packed restaurant in New York City. And then, of course, what happened? We all shut down for a long period of time. But my original founding partners and myself, Steve Tolman, who is our executive chairman, Kelly Copeland, who runs our corp dev and product strategy team, we had all been together at Onspira and in other places, and we said, okay, well, let's do this again, but let's figure out how we want to do it, learning from each process. And I will say, on behalf of Steve and Kelly, they had done this several times more than I had, so they had a lot of experience in the company formation piece. But hopefully, I had some dimension to the thinking, and we decided that it would make great sense to solve the capital part first, if we could, right? In other words, we know that there are interesting programs out there, but getting the capital first really allowed us the freedom to operate and find the kind of quality program that would be worthy of building a big company or building a company around. And so, we had had relationships and connections into the Blackstone team and other large private equity groups. We worked those connections. We very, very rapidly found that we and the Blackstone Life Sciences team, in this case, Nick Simon and Kieran Reddy, shared our view as to what we could do together, right? So Blackstone has deployable capital at scale to invest with life science companies. We have operational capabilities and company building track record, and it was just a very obvious combination. So we set out together, in that 2019 period of time to say, okay, we're going to build a company. Should be an I&I company because that was the depth of the experience on our team, and it's an area of the scale of opportunity that makes sense for a Blackstone. And we set out to find a program to build a company around. We did that very thoughtfully, and again, we did that together, being able to leverage the extraordinary scientific capabilities of the Blackstone team and our own people. Came upon TSLP as a very attractive target, the classic pipeline and a product. We were able to out-license a program that Merck had and advanced it to a certain point and then paused its development for strategic reasons. It's a good program, had excellent patient data, but they paused it for strategic reasons at that time. Made a deal, founded the company in early 2022, and off to the races we went and building along the way. But I can't overemphasize the value of having the capital partner with us along that journey right from the start as, excuse me, as a founder in the company, and having that, it just opened doors for us, not the least of which was the ability to get such a high quality program in our hands and take it forward. So that's kind of the origin story here. And 3 years plus in, it's been a great experience, and I'm super proud of the work that the team has achieved along the way.
It strikes me as a kind of chicken and egg problem in terms of getting capital support, starting, a development program, or particularly within licensing a program. And correct me if I'm wrong about this, but it seems like over the last few years, it's been more difficult for companies to get money without having, announced an initial candidate for development. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but um, how do you manage that? And you mentioned relationships at Blackstone. You and your co-founders had a record of success, which I assume really helps grease the wheels in those kinds of conversations. But I guess thinking about aspiring biotech builders who, maybe have a great idea, maybe haven't landed on an asset yet, need money to get started, whether it's an internal development discovery program or, in licensing a drug in for development. Is there anything, you would say about kind of how to think about that and how to manage it, at those early stages?
Yeah, there's several elements in your question, so let's unpack that a little bit. First of all, I'll just say anybody venturing into this needs to realize that it's very difficult, and in many ways, the cards are stacked against us all, right? Now, we came in focusing on late stage development. It's an area of expertise for our team. We knew how to build a team around that, having done that before. And look, what you said is very, very practical. Capital partners, whether it's a large, private equity group like Blackstone, or whether any of the numbers of large and small venture capital funds, are going to be most comfortable with a team that's done it before, right? That is huge. But everybody starts somewhere, and oftentimes you end up starting with, an earlier stage program that doesn't require as much money. It's still the same process though of getting some level of capital behind you and alongside you. And I just want to underscore the point that, money is not just cash. Your source of capital in the best case brings along expertise, brings along science, brings along their own sets of connections, and brings along the sort of intellectual tension to make sure that at each step along the way we're making the right decisions, right? So, one of the great things is, let's put it this way: Blackstone didn't just sign a $300 million check and say to us, "Send us a postcard when you're done," right? I mean, of course, the money gets tranched out appropriately on a milestone basis, but along the way, we work so closely with them to help solve the scientific and other problems and challenges that come up. But we've got that huge, capability behind us, not just the ability to dip into the checking account. And so that's super important. But many entrepreneurs and biotech company builders, have to start out small and start out with earlier programs that might require a little bit less capital and build that way. That's often the story that ultimately leads you to be able to do something larger. There are also, a lot of people who are on the bleeding edge of discovery, and it's fantastic. It's certainly a good thing for human health that that's happening. That just isn't where we're focused, and that's not where Blackstone's focused either. We tend to want to back programs with a lot of inpatient clinical data where a lot of the clinical risk has been discharged, and then you're getting down to just smart development strategy and operational excellence along the way to get the program to where it needs to be. So but it's hard work, and it takes a lot of grit and that DNA to be comfortable in uncertainty. But it's so rewarding when you can make it happen.
Walk me through how you landed on that specific model for Uniquity, and maybe you can just give us a sense of, at what phase or what stage that you are looking for candidates to end license, and then what your exit looks like, and how you decided on that particular model.
Sure. So we built the model in a way that really works for us. We're not the only ones who have done it this way, but at the moment, the way we're structured is that the management team, all of the people, sort of the intellectual capital and the operational capability sits in a C corp, and the asset. And at the moment, we have a single program or a single program with a couple of spin-offs. They all sit in their own capital and intellectual property containing C corp that's separate. And then we have a very strong iron linkage between the two because the management team exists for the sole purpose of developing the program. But the capital goes into that asset containing C corp. The board is mirrored, the company officers and the management team are mirrored, but that gives us some flexibility so that we could, in the appropriate situation, of course, you could transact an individual program without transacting the team along with it. Right now, I know I get every situation is going to have its own requirements, and we're also flexible along the way, but that's the way we structured it, and that's been working really, really well. But it's important to say that whether it's one program or two or three programs, you have to make sure you've built a team that is so highly focused and dedicated and gives each one of those programs all of the effort that it requires. We can't, I talked before about not cutting corners or trying to outsmart the laws of development physics. You have to make sure you're putting the right focus and the right team behind each program. So that's the way we built that. We built it to give us some flexibility. That's what's working now. Whether that works forever, we'll have to see, but that's what's working for us currently, and it's been a good model.
So it was model first and asset second, not selecting an asset and building the model around that particular asset. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, we were doing these, we were walking and chewing gum at the same time. So we were building the structure, we were working through the structural considerations again with ourselves and with Blackstone and our, various advisors while we were seeking to find the right program to serve as the core of the company to build the company around. So as that all came together, we in-licensed the product, we funded the company, and we were underway. All sort of, happened simultaneously.
What can you say about that program hunting process? How did you go about doing that? What were the kinds of things I guess that you were looking for? You mentioned, pipeline in a product. That seems like maybe it was a piece of it. But what else could you say, just maybe about the process of identifying, I guess, a short list of candidates, before making that, ultimately the decision?
Yeah, and it wasn't such a short list. I will say,
Okay.
we combed the world quite a bit as we were in the process of, really fine-tuning our approach. And I said before we became quite interested in the TSLP target. Back then, there was only a few, right? There was tezepelumab, not even yet on the market, but and a few others to follow. Now there are quite a few development stage TSLPs or even pre-development stage TSLPs. There's been a lot that have come across from Chinese developers, and each one can live or not proceed on their own merits. But at that time, 4 years ago, there's really only a few. So we were fortunate to find this just outstanding program that had been developed by a world-class company, right? I mean, this had all of the phase one preclinical work, some great patient data, so that worked for us. But we took maybe 20 programs through fairly deep diligence, and many of them didn't meet our threshold. Threshold's pretty high. The mesh of our decision filter is very tight because again, our capital comes from a company that wants very solid clinical proxy, wants patient data, but also together we wanted programs that were big enough to put capital at scale to work, right? So that naturally points you towards big chronic conditions, high unmet need, and that's where we landed. So, fast forward to now, we're in the clinic for, asthma, COPD, which is huge and unmet need. It's the third leading cause of death around the world. Eosinophilic esophagitis, which I think will be a real star for us. It's almost complete white space, and these are patients that really, really suffer, right? This is a very terrible disease, and there's really not much that works for them. But the promise of biologic therapy, like an anti-TSLP program, is huge and really changing their lives. I spend a lot of time visiting clinical trial sites, talking to investigators. Uh, that is a condition that the investigators are really very, very personally interested in because they're treating these patients and they don't have much that they could do for them. So I'm excited about COPD. It's a huge opportunity. We're going to, I think change the world there as well. But EOE, I think, is going to have a very interesting personal dimension to it. So it's what makes this business interesting, right?
Yeah, and I have some questions I want to ask you about your development candidate. But before I get to that, I'm curious about just how you got to the list of 20. Were you out there just, pounding the medical journals, talking to physicians? Did were there other tools that you used to help you evaluate, the world of potential candidates out there? What can you say about that?
Yeah, it's more just hard work, as you said, scoping through the journals. We came upon the Merck program actually by doing some research to see who had advanced TSLP into clinical. That was worked on, with our Blackstone partners. It's also an area where the network comes to play, right? So we've all been involved in this for a long time. We have connections, and it's reaching into the companies to see what programs either they need help with or have potentially stalled for the wrong reasons. You know, companies like ours, we're not the only one who does this, but I think we do it pretty well, and we hope to continue to do it. I think serves a very good purpose. There's no pharma company out there, I don't care how big they are, that has resources to do everything they should need to do, right? And so companies like ours can come along, pick up a program in its mid-stage development, take it through proof of concept, take it through, clinical programs and get it, either ready for commercialization or ready for phase 3 pivotals. And then at the appropriate time, return it back, either return it to the original home or move it to a more appropriate manager, right? So a company that's well placed to do the, 3,000 patient trials, or even more importantly, to commercialize globally, right? We need to be able to take a program all the way through those points, but it becomes logical that at certain points the program is best managed by backed by a larger player. And you're seeing some really good examples of how that's starting to become really part of the model that makes a lot of sense, right? No big pharma, I don't care how successful or well capitalized they are, can do everything they want to. But many of them have promising programs that a company like ours, a capability like ours, can help advance and then potentially put it back in those hands.
Right. Yeah. I'm curious. Yeah. I wonder, if there are investors that you run into who, who kind of have this, maybe a knee-jerk response to, well, if Merck didn't develop it, it couldn't be that valuable. I think most of us who certainly who cover the industry and work in it know that there are any number of reasons why, a company will decide not to develop a given asset for all sorts of reasons that have nothing to do with the science. But do you run into that, people questioning whether, a drug could be a meaningful new product after, Merck, for in this example, decided not to pursue it?
Yeah, we get that question a little bit. We don't get it as often as you might think, but again, we're talking with pretty sophisticated investors and partners. They kind of understand it, right? And they're seeing the model of how this works. And remember, companies change their focus too. Strategic focus is a dynamic thing, and companies come in and out of various areas of interest and focus, and that's perfectly understandable because it creates great opportunity for companies like ours. But yeah, I mean, and the answer is, I'll use our program as an example. Merck had spent uh, great resource and great time advancing it to a certain point. Pause that for very good strategic reasons. They didn't pause it because it had safety issues. It didn't pause it because it didn't work. They paused it because they had other areas of strategic focus. And companies make portfolio reprioritization all the time. I mean, there are truly seasons to that activity, right? But then by for a program to then find its way into the hands of a company like ours, we can develop it. We can take the development risk through that next stage using someone else's capital. If we do our job well and we increase the value, well, then a potential acquirer has the chance to come in and take the program, either take it back or acquire the basis of the work that we've done. So there's no loser in that. Really, the loser is if the shelves get filled with programs that gather dust and never advance. And that's when it's a real shame, right? So, our goal is to find promising programs that have stalled and do our very best to bring them ultimately to serve the needs of patients.
Following up on what you said previously and just now about developing it up to a certain point, and then finding a partner that can take it to the next level, conduct large trials, exercise their network strength in various ways, and even into the commercial realm. Do you anticipate that being kind of inbound inquiries, people watching the program externally, seeing it perform, getting in touch with you, making offers, or is there an outbound component where, you're evaluating the companies out there where it might be a fit and you're kind of proactively reaching out, or maybe it's
Yeah,
both.
it absolutely is both. And I just want to clarify one point because, we have to make sure that we can take a program as far in our hands as we need to, right? Because external market, the mindset of potential acquirers, their capital abilities, we're never guaranteed that when we meet a milestone that we're going to be able to transact a program. And in some cases, we won't want to, right? I mean, there are many cases where somebody could say, "Look, we think we'd like to take this program," and we say, "Well, actually, we're still in the value creating part of this, and we're going to hold on to it and continue to do that." And it's where having, just this high quality capital and access to that, it really makes a difference. So, we fully have plans to take this program as far as we need to, all the way through phase two, all the way through phase three, right up to, and if we had to, we would work to solve commercialization. But it's also logical along the way that there's a very nice fit to be had with another company. So, in answer to your question, it is both. It's we get increasingly now that we emerged from stealth in the middle of last year, we get lots of inbounds. I'd say, we came out of stealth mode last May, not quite a year from now, but we're pretty well known out there, and we're well known by any potential acquirer. And we have informal, ranging to formal conversations with multiples of those. They're smart enough to want to stay on top of what we're doing. We're smart enough to ask for their views on what we're doing, and at the end of it, there may or may be a deal to be made, but we're faithful to the program and making sure we're exercising what we do as best we possibly can, and then confident that the right thing will happen.
Right. Solritatug, I believe, is a bispecific antibody. Is that correct?
No, so just to clarify, so solritatug is a mono anti-TSLP inhibitor. We also, in our pipeline, have two bispecific antibodies that use solritatug as the backbone, right? So,
Ah,
in other words, TSLP plus cytokine A plus cytokine B. We've kept the selection confidential right now, but we're advancing it pretty very quickly, and we expect candidate selection by the end of this year. Very excited about those programs because what that does is if you step back and you look at what we have as a pipeline now, you have the mono agent, the solritatug, which we fully expect has the very strong potential to be second to market in the MOA behind tezepelumab, and will serve a huge market, and we think will perform very well as a differentiated molecule. And then as a life cycle follow-on capability, we have these two programs that take solritatug, add additional cytokine blockers to it, and have the potential to either expand into different indications or to access and fulfill the needs of different patient phenotypes. So bispecifics are becoming really quite exciting now, but they're quite a bit earlier. We like to think we've got the best of both worlds, and they're all based on what we think is, best in class or at the top of the class for the backbone. So that's how it works.
now if Solritatug is picked up by a partner for late stage development, commercialization, or bringing it across the finish line, does that jeopardize at all the earlier stage bispecific programs, or is that just worked out as part of the contract where you would out license it to a provider or another company to get regulatory approval, commercialize it, and then I guess what pay a certain amount of as part of the your next stage, your bispecific programs. How does that work?
Well, Ben, if I had the answer to all of those questions, I would have it all mapped out, wouldn't I? No, I think, like always, any of the above, right? And we'll always be faithful to value creation, what's best for the medicines that we're bringing forward, and there are ways to solve all of those um, opportunities, I'll say, right? So, right now we don't have this is the one size fits all, or this is the only way to approach that. We're focusing on developing, as I said, the selecting the candidates and keeping those moving on the two bispecific programs and generating high quality, outstanding, differentiating data on the core program. And that is our best path to generating value across the whole portfolio.
There is some general excitement around bispecific, multi-specific antibodies. I'm curious if that has any meaningful business impact for Uniquity one way or the other. Does it? I don't know. Does it give you a lift? Does it make it more difficult to kind of raise your programs above the noise? What would you say about that?
It doesn't let me just say we're not having any problem getting engagement on our story, right?
Okay.
And part of that, I'm sure it can be attributed to the fact that we do have these interesting bispecifics coming along, but they're much, much earlier. We're finding that, the true engagement and the near-term value is in this the mono agent that, will be on the market in these big significant indications in this sort of 2029 time point, which not incidentally or not coincidentally is exactly when many big pharma partners will need to be replacing huge amounts of revenue that they're losing for LOE reasons. So,
Yeah,
the
holes in the
timing of
pipeline, right?
absolutely. So we'll have this. I mean, this is a multi-billion dollar revenue program, many multiples of that will be ready for market in that kind of timing. So that alone is generating a lot of inbound interest. But we're not rushing to that, right? Again, the job here is to get the product developed and developed well, and let the data tell the story, and then we'll make the strategic decisions that make sense then. But I think we've got really good opportunities, and the bispecifics are part of that. We do get inbound interest because somebody hears we have a bispecific, and then when we show them the whole picture, they say, "Okay, well that's pretty compelling," and we take that conversation forward. It's
You're not going to rush the development, but Uniquity is set up to be a very efficient mid to late stage drug developer. We spoke briefly just in a pre-introductory call about time, as a scarce resource and what that means for business leaders. And I'm curious about how you set priorities for your teams, how you hold them accountable, how you make sure that that you're flexing that model of efficiency to get the development done, not too fast, but not too slow either.
it's a very important point. If you talk to my team, they'll tell you I probably say too many times that, I can probably raise more capital tomorrow, but I can never raise more time, right? Yesterday is gone. We're not going to get that one back. And in a competitive environment, like we talked before, I&I is an attractive place, and there's a lot of TSLPs and a lot of competing products becoming, working their way through various stages of development. So we can't just sit back and say, well, we don't pay attention to the timelines. So getting that balance right is very important. It's one of the reasons why we think we've got kind of like the Goldilocks approach here, where we're big enough to do this work really, really well with a high degree of rigor, doing it, as I said before, in a way that a partner and investor will be impressed and will not say, "Oh, these guys cut corners," right? At the same time, we can be very efficient in our decision making, and we can, in fact, in some cases, pivot and make changes in real time. And I'll give you an example of that. There over the last 12 months, there's been outstanding efficacy data in COPD from tezepelumab, the on-market TSLP. We were at the ATS meeting in San Diego when that was happening. As we listened to and participated in the conversations around the release of that data, we pulled our decision makers into a conference room 5 minutes from the conference center or from the convention center, rapidly interpreted what we heard, made some decisions about how that would impact our thinking for our development program, made those changes and implemented them in days and weeks, not months and years, right? So again, having come from larger organizations, it just takes longer for that to happen. And if we can turn around smart decisions, and these aren't knee-jerk reactions, these are still thoughtful decisions with a lot of rigor and again, ourselves and using our external resources as well. But if we can do that with speed and efficiency, we can take slack out of the system and we can take slack and we're responding in real time to opportunities. So that's an example of what we try and do here every day. Um, in terms of tracking and keeping everybody aligned, it's hard because we're not you say the other part of my argument, we don't have extra people and we don't have extra time and we all have a lot to do. So we just have to be rigorous and smart about what we bite off, about focusing and, aligning our efforts towards the highest priority things, be willing to step aside from the lower priority ones. Understand that not everybody needs to attend every meeting, not everybody needs to be part of every single decision, but work together as a team efficiently and effectively to advance the ball. And that's been working great. And we think about that every single day as a team here.
I want to ask you a little bit more about, good people. Life science leader, historically and to this day, we cover a lot of leadership topics. I speak to a lot of executives about the importance of culture and company values. And what I find is that, everybody wants to have good people. It's tough to take it down a level or two levels from that to really dissect what it means to to be a good person, so to speak. I guess in this context, a lot of times, I guess what I'm trying to say is that I hear platitudes, about value statements, about putting patients first. But I think it's a fact that not everyone with a great value statement has a great culture. And I'm curious, Brian, what you might say about how you make that real, how you create a really good culture, not just a list of values on the wall.
I'm really glad you brought that up because I've been a big believer in the impact of culture for a long, long time. And also how culture is the net result of a bunch of people spending time together, right? And I've had discussions, I must use the word arguments, but I've had discussions with people who didn't share that, not in the company, luckily, but other leaders, we talk about these kind of things. And I once had somebody say to me, well, we're not big enough to need to worry about culture, or, well, our organizational structure isn't kind of fit to think about culture. And so we really don't have a culture. And I said, well, actually, I disagree. You have a culture, you're just not controlling it. You're not informing it. You're not nurturing it. And I think of culture as being, and this is okay. I'm going to give you a platitude, so guilty as charged before I say it. But it's like a garden, right? You can plant a beautiful garden, but if you're not nourishing it, you're not making sure it gets sun and water and protecting it from harm, eventually it's just going to wither and die and get diseased. And culture is the same thing. And we just did a lot of work on culture. We've this last summer because at kind of 2.5 years, I figured, okay, this is the time not to just let it roll on its own, but let's first of all decide as a group what we want it to be. What do we aspire to be? Are we adhering to that? And how do we mold that and form it and maintain it? So we spend a lot of work on that, which a lot of small companies might not spend time on, but boy, it was time well spent. And I think it in a way, just doing that informs the culture, right? It's part of our culture to do that work. And it was very worthwhile. And we started with hearing from the people, like, who are we? What do we stand for? What do you think about when you think about this company? Because at that point, we had some people who'd been here for, over 2 years and others that had been fairly recent. So we did a cross section And the words that came back were just really great. It were the ones you would want to see. And it was a combination of, hard work and intellectual horsepower, but being nice and having fun and being respectful and being open-minded and all of that. And um, we we put that up on our website. We put it up on our walls. We remind ourselves, but we also check in on that. Now, I do a town hall at least every quarter, and in that town hall, I try and be faithful to asking the team, how are we doing on our culture, right? Here's what we set out to do. Here's what we said we were last time we talked about this. Are we still that? And if we're not, why not? And one of the core tenets of our culture here is just an openness of communication. Like there's nothing that's off limits, whether it be the way we're working or the way somebody's being treated or a development decision we're making. And this view is shared across our leadership team. If somebody has something that they don't feel is going right, they need to tell us, tell me, tell my colleagues. If there's something that's going really well, please feel free to share that too, right? But it's this openness and transparency, and there's no wrong answers to it. But if we do that, it makes everybody feel like they're part of what we do, and their fingerprints are all over it. Because the job is big, the team is small, so we can't have people that just sit and kind of let the work happen. We all have to be actively driving the work and driving the culture. So that's the way, I kind of think about it. It is something that I've learned along the way is very important. I've made bad choices in terms of people on a team before. I learned from those choices. Luckily, it haven't been too many for the most part. I've been very, very fortunate there. But I learned that one or two bad people can really mess up a company really fast. So we pay a lot of attention to that from day zero all the way through the life of the team.
And no jerks. I like that as a core principle
Yeah,
too.
sure. And and then I say, look, if I'm violating that in some way, please let me know because, feedback's important, right? I mean, we all need to put a mirror up once in a while because you get going very quickly and it's easy to think that, you've got the answers to every question and I certainly don't. But I like to think that collectively with a really outstanding team, which I would hand on heart, I'd take this team anywhere and put any challenge in front of them. I think we'll figure it out.
Obviously, technical expertise is extremely important in a hire. You want someone who's really good at what they do. I'm curious, though, if there's anything else that you look for in a hire outside of that, basic fitting a puzzle piece into the right place in a company. They have the skills, they have the talent, maybe they have the experience. Are there any sort of extraneous attributes, character that you look for in a hire?
Uh, Absolutely. And in fact, you just outlined, the technical skills, super important. And again, we have some jobs that are highly technical where the qualifications are very clear and it's easy to say, okay, here's the checklist, and the person does or does not have that in their education or their experience. We also spend as much time, if not more so, on the soft skills part as best we can. And what do I mean by that? Well, we use a behavioral inventory tool, behavioral insights tool for anyone that's getting pretty close to an offer, right? Sometimes we'll do it for two, even three candidates as they're getting closer, depending on what the job is. And that's a tool that lets us and the candidate understand how they approach challenges, how they approach team dynamics, how they, look at the world, right? And I've been through many of those types of programs. I will say that this one is really, really strong. And when I took it 3 years ago or 2.5 years ago, everybody in the company took it, and founders, and we still use it to this day, and it gives insights that I didn't really appreciate about myself, right? So, and part of that, then we can collect the outputs from that at a team level or at a company level, and it gives us kind of a view of, are we all exactly alike? The answer to that is no. Are we complementary? The answer to that is for the most part, but also are there holes? Are there areas where next time you hire, gosh, it'd be great to get somebody on the team with a little more of this or a little less of that because we're over indexing. So it's just one piece of it, but it really gives us insight. And what we've heard echoed back at us from candidates is they say, well, I hope I get this job, but even if I don't, but that was really cool. It was really valuable. I haven't been through something like that before I get a job. And it's a small investment. I mean, this isn't a lot of money and time. We have a really great team supporting our HR strategy, and we have external groups that they leverage to do that for us. It really pays off, right? It really pays off because we all can learn all the time about how we interact, and that's one of the ways we do it. And then the rest is just, taking the time to check references, to talk to people and talk to people who know those people and ask them the questions. Because at the end of the day, making a hire, we can't afford to make a bad hire and then take 16 months to work through that, realize it, manage the performance, and then find that actually we need to part ways. That's a huge waste of time. It's heart-wrenching for everybody involved, and I really don't want to do it. So we try and do the work beforehand so that when somebody joins, they really feel like this is a great place. I'm enjoying it. And then, I and the rest of my colleagues on the leadership team would check in with people a lot. We try and spend a lot of time not just talking about the advancement of the program, but how's it going and what can we do differently? How can I help you do your job better? What do you think we're missing here as a team? It's one of the benefits of coming out of COVID. We talked a while ago, Ben, about how do we pull the company together. We founded this company completely virtually. This was a Zoom founded company, and we didn't meet. We had known some of the folks before, but we didn't meet in the context of this company face to face with our board members until our first board meeting, and which was well after the company had been founded, and we had been working together for way more than a year. So the good news is that part is behind us because we're all believers here in the value of being together as much as we can. We have a lot of people based in the office here outside of Philadelphia. We have a half dozen folks in a great office in San Diego, and then we do have people in different places because even though I believe in face-to-face interactions, I believe in the right fit and the right talent more. So we have erred on the side of talent over geography. But that being said, we work hard to very frequently make sure we're getting people together. And when we do, we get to have those conversations. And I think everybody would agree. Zoom is great. You can get a lot done, but so is running into somebody's office and say, "Hey, you have a minute? I need to run something by you, or I'd like to get your opinion, or haven't seen you in a while, and we just finished that meeting on chemistry, but how are your kids doing?" Right? It's that kind of stuff that is really, I think, super helpful.
Absolutely. I'm curious about what's the name of that behavioral tool or program.
It's called the behavioral insight. We call it the BI, and I'm pretty sure it's behavioral insight. And it's done by one of the external groups. This is a validated tool. It's used by
Yeah.
large and small companies all over the place. I hadn't used it before. I mean, as you know, there's a whole catalog of programs, and they're all quite useful. But this is one that was brought to us by our HR folks, and I just love it. And everybody's really found that it gives shines a light on a different dimension of them rather than just the MBTI and other things that we've all done.
Excellent. Well, in our final couple of minutes here, Brian, I'd love to hear what your top priorities are for 2025 and any key upcoming milestones you'd like to mention.
Yeah, for sure there are there are many, right? There's no problem in listing those out. Job number one here is to develop the program and generate, high quality, outstanding data in our three clinical trials, right? So asthma and COPD later this year and early next year, EOE also early next year. So those are going to be, really that's what we are here for, is to generate impressive, differentiated, high quality data that will satisfy either our own need, a desire to continue efficiently into the phase three pivotals, or to transact that program. So that's job number one. Making sure that we've got the capital to do that, right? So we've got a number of different options. We have Blackstone as a partner, but should we decide to go further, we'll have additional capital needs. So we're working through a number of options there. The good news is this is the feedback we are getting as we undertake that process is this is a very high quality story, and it's one that really fits the needs of a blue chip investor base. So we will be able to do that, and we've got optionality in doing that. So we're working that angle, continuing our strategic discussions, continuing to look for new programs. Right? We talked before about the desire to have an ability to evergreen the team to some extent and to have a conveyor of opportunities so that we can continue to leverage what we've built here beyond any one program. So, those are the major milestones that we're looking for. But then I've been doing this long enough to realize there are things that are going to come up that I'm going to have to prioritize and deal with. There are always going to be curveballs or surprises, either internally or biologically or geopolitically. I mean, it's not like we're in a completely predictable world out there, right? So we have to keep an eye on all of that, and we have to understand how might that impact the work that we're doing and making sure we're stepping back and we're prepared and we have sort of contingencies along the way. But we've got the team, the people, the capital resources to do that. That gives me a lot of levers I can pull, right? So I think we're in really good shape. But now we have to keep doing the job.
That is Brian Lortie, President and CEO at Uniquity Bio. I'm Ben Comer, and you've just listened to the Business of Biotech. Find us and subscribe anywhere you listen to podcasts, and be sure to check out new weekly videocasts of these conversations every Monday under the Business of Biotech tab at lifescienceleader.com. We'll see you next week, and thanks for listening.